I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Morteza Farajian. Dr. Farajian was appointed by President Trump in 2019 as the executive director of the Build America Bureau within the US DOT. Before assuming his current role, Dr. Farajian served as acting Deputy Secretary of Transportation and Director of the Public-Private Partnerships Office in Virginia. Over the course of 7 years, he led the procurement, financing, and contract negotiations for multimodal transportation projects totaling $14 billion. His strategic reforms to enhance competition, unleash private sector's innovation, improve stakeholder engagement, and increase accountability elevated Virginia's P3 program to become the leading P3 program in the U.S., earning numerous national and international accolades. Dr. Farajian, please come up.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that are not from DC area, believe me, this is not the weather that we usually have here, but all this week is going to be raining. I blame it on those who came probably from areas that see more rain. I was just talking to someone earlier about London. I even heard that London weather is better than DC's weather this week. But anyways, here we are. In Washington, D.C., it's a good week to be here. Infrastructure week, a lot is happening. Overall, as you know, a lot is happening in U.S. infrastructure sector. Today, I'm here to talk a little bit about Build America Bureau. I don't know how many of you have heard about Build America Bureau. Just if you have heard it, raise your hands. A couple, I see. Actually, more than what I expected, which is good. But Build America Bureau was created about 7.5, 8 years ago. The first executive director was appointed by President Obama at the time. It was toward the end of President Obama's term. And then I'm the second executive director. I have been with the Bureau for about 6 years. The first executive director was there for about a year, a little less than a year. And for a period of time, we didn't have executive director, of course, for about a year or so until I started at the Bureau. But the reason that Bureau was created at US DOT was because we had a couple of programs within US DOT at different parts of DOT. We had our TIFIA program, which was mainly financing, and it still is financing, highway projects and transit projects. And of course, it has been expanded since then. Now we can even finance transit-oriented development projects, as well as projects at ports. And recently we got authorization from Congress to even finance airport projects. That program was at Federal Highway Administration. And we had another program called RIF, which was administered by Federal Railroad Administration. RIF was mainly focused on rail projects. We had private activity bonds, which is basically the tax-exempt status that private issuers of the bonds who are planning to invest proceeds of the bond issuance in eligible transportation improvements would get tax-exempt status on their bonds. In other words, it would be treated from tax purposes like municipal bonds that would reduce the interest rate on the bonds because investors would not pay full or actually any federal income tax. So they would accept a slightly lower interest rate on those bonds that would reduce the financing cost for a project altogether. The decision was made to bring all of them and put them all under one roof, which is called Build America Bureau. The reason for it was to make it a little bit more consistent and also try to expand these programs and then reach to the industry and try to include as many projects as possible. Get some water. At the time, actually all three of those programs were active, but not as active as they are today. Over the last couple of years, a lot has happened. The use of those programs has grown significantly. Let me just start with RIF, which I think is the one that would be more interesting to this group because it can finance passenger rail projects, including high-speed rail. On the RIF program, Congress has given us authority up to $35 billion of outstanding principal amount at any given time to lend at treasury rates, whatever the rate that U.S. Treasury on the day that we close the loan has, that's the rate that borrowers pay. But we're not given any budget from Congress to subsidize the loan or pay for credit risk premium. In the past, we used to calculate how much that is and then ask the borrower to pay the upfront fee to us at closing. It's about a year or so that we have fixed that problem, especially on for projects that are a little bit riskier, including high-speed rail projects that could have been problematic. So the new approach we have now is that depending on where that credit risk premium would land, we would calculate what's the equivalent of interest rate that we should charge on top of treasury rate. But still, you can see that the rates are pretty competitive compared to what you might see in market. For example, for a project that is backed by tax dollars and has very strong credit, in other words, they are rated in the A range, whether a single A, double A, or triple A, the credit risk premium could be zero, which means we are going to just lend at treasury rates. And treasury rates today for a 30-year, 35-year fixed loan, about, I think it's a slightly less than 5%. It's about 4.8%. But for a project that would fall in the, let's say, triple B category or even double B category, maybe that rate, the credit risk premium would be slightly higher. And that project would be assessed at about a 50, 75 basis point. That would increase interest rate to 5.5% based on today's rates. We have about $10 billion outstanding right now under that program. We have a couple of projects that we have financed. Of course, no high-speed rail project yet. But we do have a couple of rail projects that either Amtrak has borrowed from us or MBTA or other rail operators for rolling the stock as well as for capital improvements. For example, the recent loans that we closed in New York for Hudson Tunnel, State of New Jersey, State of New York, as well as Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, each one of them got a loan, and I think the combined value is about $4.5 billion between those three loans that they put in the construction of the new Hudson Tunnel that is going to be built in that area, and it's going to be used by trains, of course. We also have, before going there, we also have other flexibilities that we provide on the RIF program. One of the things that doesn't exist anywhere else in the market is the fact that Congress has given us authority to go even up to 75 years for the duration of our loans. They haven't closed a loan at 75 years term yet, but we do have some guidelines around it that, of course, the useful life of the asset has to be 100 years or longer. So for a lot of bridges or any other type of assets that are designed and built to last for a long time, like tunnels, that's an option. We can stretch out the payments of the project, especially for larger projects that would be very expensive. This could be a really good option to just make it financially more feasible and stretch out the payments over a longer period of time. We have the ability to not collect any debt service payments during construction. The interest is going to be accrued. And also, we are not going to charge any interest until the money is drawn from the account. So when we close a loan, let's say we close a loan for $4.5 million for Hudson Tunnel, year one, they're going through design and permitting, and they only need to draw on $500 million. They only pay interest on that $500 million. The other $4 billion that is sitting in the bank account, it's interest-free. And you can do the math, especially for projects that they have a long construction schedule, and see how much the project could potentially save within 4 or 5 or 6 years of construction before it's operational, by just being able to have the flexibility of drawing on that fund as needed, or using other sources of funds and then drawing on their RIF loan or TIFIA loan toward the end. So the borrower would have the flexibility to play in the financial model to come up with the most efficient financial model. They can also go to a bank to get a construction loan and then draw on a loan all the way at the end of construction to pay off the bank loan, if they can get better terms and conditions from a bank for the construction loan. And of course, Our loan is going to be interest-free until they draw on it to pay back the bank. But everything about it is going to be fixed, all the terms and conditions and commitment and interest rate, to give them 100% certainty that this is a done deal. This is not still a contingent approval. This is a done deal. We also have our private activity bond that Brightline, which I'm sure many of you have heard about them. They have been mentioned on different panels this morning and probably even in the afternoon. They have used our private activity bonds for both of their projects. The project that they built in Florida, as well as the project that they're trying to build in Nevada and California on the West Coast. Collectively, I believe they have got authority to issue slightly less than $9 billion. It's $8.7 billion between those two projects. $5.5 billion is for Brightline West project on the West Coast, and about $3 billion, I believe, give or take, I think it's $3.2 billion, the exact number, is for their project in Florida, that they got tax exempt status, so the bonds that they issued are not going to have any federal income tax for the investors in those bonds. Those are the two examples. One of the challenges we have these days is that we talked about opportunities and how some folks are taking advantage of these products that we have, but let's also talk a little about challenges. On the challenges side, we are out of the authority that Congress gave us to allocate private activity bonds. So pretty much the $30 billion that we have is all allocated between the approximately $9 billion that we have given to Brightline and the rest that we have given to mainly highway projects, toll roads in the United States. I can say that probably all of the P3 toll road projects in the United States have used our private activity bonds. Some of them may have not used our loans. The majority of them have used, and they have combined them. But pretty much all of them have used our private activity bonds. But we're out of the capacity. Pretty much, I think we have 2 more applications to take action on them. And if we approve those, the $30 billion that we got from Congress is going to be finished. There are efforts in Congress to address that by potentially giving us more allocation. I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, but in general, that's a program that has not been a political program. I think on both sides of the aisle, we have seen support for it, as well as from industry, we have seen support for that program. I always tell people that it's good news when we run out of private activity bonds, because that shows how much private investment has gone to U.S. infrastructure. I mean, that's a good story to tell, that $30 billion of private investment has gone to U.S. infrastructure, partially because of this benefit that private activity bonds has provided. Bureau is not just a bank. I talked a little bit about the benefits on the financing side, but Bureau is not just a bank. We also have a couple of grant programs that are designed to help project sponsors who want to think outside the box, who want to look at innovative funding, financing, and delivery options to build capacity. I'm going to highlight a couple of them today, not all of them, but the 2 that I want to highlight, one is called Regional Infrastructure Accelerators. We just issued a notice of funding opportunity or availability for $20 million. Project sponsors who want to get that funding from us, it's a form of a grant. There's no match requirement for it, to hire consultants or hire internal staff and be able to build that capacity, because as we all know, it's really hard to have access to the right folks, especially in that early stage that you're trying to identify good projects, identify good opportunities, and try to really build a business case that then you can take to a board and give approval and additional budget to pursue it. That's what that money is used for. And I believe the deadline is in about, we start accepting applications in about 3 weeks or so. And we typically keep it open for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we do our evaluations and make the announcement. So far, we have gone through 3 rounds of the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. It has been very popular. I can tell you, for example, some cities have used it. Sandag in California has got 2 grants from us. City of Tampa, City of Fort Lauderdale, as well as counties or the state DOTs, they have used it for various types of projects. I don't think any high-speed rail project has used it, but we have had a mixed type of projects, from transit-oriented development type projects to inland ports, to toll roads, bridges, tunnels, those type of assets that in the past have taken advantage of it. The other program is called Innovative Finance and Asset Concession. We awarded $50 million, very similar in terms of the process to the previous one that I mentioned. But Innovative Finance and Asset Concession is specifically designed to give funding to project sponsors who want to do asset scanning, to identify what type of assets do they own that are underutilized or they have potential for better utilization. Our goal is to create a national database of those assets. So we're going to collect information from them, gather it, combine it, and then publicly issue that data, with the hope that we can make it easier for private developers to have access to that information and then know who to contact with the ideas that they may have. Most of the work is probably centered around properties that project sponsors own around transit stations or passenger rail stations. Like what I mentioned before, we can finance TOD deals, we can finance real estate development or public infrastructure around passenger rail stations. And both of our programs, but REF is a little bit more flexible, and we do have a pipeline for that already. The goal there is to make sure that we encourage more development around the stations, but also create a revenue source for the station or the transit operator, because we are subsidizing the loan, we are saving the developer, and we want to see some sort of revenue generation that will go back to transportation projects. And hopefully this database is going to help to have many of those projects. We already have a few that we are working with, but the idea is to expand it at a larger scale and see more of those type of projects that are focused on better usage of existing properties, existing assets that are underutilized, but they have potential for creating some revenue source. And I can see that also being something that maybe this group would be interested in, especially stations around, especially properties around high-speed rail stations, and how that money can be captured and reinvested in the project. So let me just stop there by saying that there are opportunities, there are challenges, particularly on the financing side. Getting some of these projects to where the credit would be suitable for a loan, I think that's a big challenge that maybe the industry collectively can work and get it there. It just reminds me of the time that we were working on managed lane projects about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And we had similar issues. We didn't have a lot of history, we didn't have a lot of data, but today it's a whole different story. I can tell you that managed lanes are doing pretty good night stays. We have plenty of data, and they're being upgraded in many cases. So let me stop there and have a little bit of a water so I can talk a little bit more. Sorry. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So I about projects that require. Oh, thank you. My question's about projects that require some sort of value capture as part of the funding for the greenfield aspect of the project. So from where you sit, are you seeing that public authorities, borrowers are needing more of this type of funding for ambitious projects?
I would say yes. Well, I gotta see, the way that I look at these projects is we need to look at all opportunities to extract value out of everything that we have to reinvest in the development. We know it's expensive, and we know it's not easy to take down some of the silos and think beyond just one investment versus the other investment. I see these related to each other. It's not just about value capture. And I mean, I hope the way that I explained the innovative finance and asset concession grant was clear that the goal there is not just to squeeze a little bit more out of the existing properties or charge more taxes. The goal there is to actually develop more. The goal there is that if there is a parking lot, surface parking lot right next to a transit station, think how we can have a multi-use development in that surface parking lot, because a surface parking lot is not the best use for that property. That property is gold, and that property can generate cash. So looking at everything, every tool in the toolbox to really figure out what makes logical sense. It's not just also about money, it's about ridership. You want to make sure that it is a logical project. Everything that comes together as different pieces of puzzle, they all help each other, not only in terms of the additional taxes that they can generate, but additional value, additional potentially land lease or other types of revenues that it can generate, and then ridership and fare box revenue. I think they're all tied into each other. And the way I look at it as a more comprehensive type of view, that I think they can all help each other and play with each other to give us a more feasible type of development. And that's what, again, towards, I mean, if you look at express lanes and see how private sector steps in and tries to redesign the facility in terms of different access points, in terms of different incentives and programs they provide, and different type of customer service. The whole goal there is also, particularly in public-private partnership model, to extract more value out of this development. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Feedback gotten from the projects or the people involved when they've borrowed the funds, and what they're telling you as far as positive pros and cons.
You're talking about feedback about the loan itself. Some of them initially they have a hard time understanding what type of requirements they should comply with. Our loans with federalized project, many projects are already federalized. There is some sort of federal grant on them that they have already been federalized. We don't bring more requirements if project is already federalized. But if project is not federalized at all, well, that's one thing that they need to understand. And then really the equation they need to solve for themselves is that how much they save versus how difficult it is to comply with the requirements. For example, Buy America or the NIPA requirement or other things. Most of the projects that I have dealt with, especially rail projects, are already federalized, and anyways, they have to comply with those requirements. On the savings side, I can tell you though, once they borrow one time and they go through the process and they understand how it works, they will come back. I mean, that's the experience that we have had. I can give you an example. For example, on the highway side again, Oklahoma, state of Oklahoma, it's a relatively conservative state. They don't borrow, but they closed their first loan with us back in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. The first loan took them about a year, probably a little bit more than a year, to close with us. After that, they have closed 4 more loans. The last time that we closed a loan for them, they closed 3 loans at the same time. And it was all 3 of them were closed in 2 or 3 months. Part of it is also because once we negotiate a loan agreement, we can recycle that and use it for the next loans much easier. And also, once we look at the balance sheet of the borrower once, it's so much easier next time to just look at it, update it, but we're already familiar with the structure, with the balance sheet, who are the investors, what are the risks, and so on. So it's first time, I would say, it's a little bit challenging, and that's the feedback we get from folks. But then after that, we have a lot of folks who come back and borrow. And before joining Build America Bureau, by the way, Virginia was the #1 borrower. So all of those projects that were mentioned earlier, I negotiated those deals when I was in Virginia. Virginia was #1 borrower, and that came up in my interview with Secretary Chow. She said, "How come you guys are taking half of our funding and the rest of the United States is taking the other half? Something doesn't sound right. So we want you to come over and teach the rest of the United States how to take advantage of these funds. And today when I'm talking with you, a lot has changed because back then, Bureau had a $4 billion pipeline. Today that we're talking, our pipeline is $40 billion. So that's a pipeline that my underwriters and my project development team is working on actively to close within the next 2 years or so. And these loans are pretty secure for federal government. I think that's the other side of the story. Again, we haven't had a loan for high-speed rail yet, but I can tell you overall, when you look at, for example, our TIFIA portfolio over the last 27 years, we have closed over $60 billion in terms of financing, and most of it has been in recent years. When I say recent years, the last 10 to 15 years. We have only had 4 projects in default out of probably about 104 projects that we have closed. And the loss rate for the program is very close to zero. And we have had about $90 million out of 60-something billion that we have underwritten. So overall, it's a very secure program for US government. And that's probably one of the reasons that, again, on the political side, there is support for these programs, no matter what side of the aisle you're looking at. Yes, sir.
For all the folks in the room to understand, when should a project developer or borrower consider between a TIFIA or a RIF direct loan? And what does the project need to look like for one to make more sense than the other? In the context of passenger rail.
I'll take a step backward. In general, we tell project sponsors to contact us as early as possible, because unlike grants that there is usually an arm length distance, and we tell grant applicants that you have one shot. So put everything in your application and make sure that that's your best shot. With loans, it's a whole different story. We encourage them to talk to us early. We even coach them. We give them information on what's the best way to submit what we call letter of interest. We get it in draft format. We give them feedback before it's finalized. And that's when we actually share all of the different opportunities with them. We give them preliminary eligibility determination, whether they can apply under both of those programs or one program. I can tell you some of the rail projects, especially if they qualify as commuter rail, they can apply under both. And I can see how many of the projects that you guys are talking about here could potentially apply under both. The two programs are different though. Under TIFIA, we get budget from Congress to pay for that credit risk premium I mentioned earlier. So you don't need to worry about that. The rates are going to be exactly Treasury rates. The downside of it is, it's not a downside, it's really the other side of it is project needs to be investment grade rated. And I know high-speed rail projects initially have a hard time to get the investment grade rating. If there's a way to get them to investment grade rating, I would say TIFIA is probably the better way to go. But TIFIA is also capped at 49% of total project cost. Total project cost includes everything. All the studies, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, design, permitting, construction, just name it. You can put everything in one package and borrow about half of that amount. Under RIF, we can go up to 100%. There is no requirement to be investment grade rated. But remember, the credit risk premium is not paid by us, appropriated by Congress. It is the borrower that is responsible for that. So the moment the project goes below investment grade rating, if it's very close, just one notch below investment grade rating, you're talking about 50 to 100 basis point increase in the interest rate. But if you keep going lower and lower, you might have a scenario that the interest rate is going to go up 200, 300, 400 basis point, which would make it economically infeasible for project sponsor. So really the key is how to push back the credit quality of the financial model to be either an investment grade rating level or just below that. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is if you can get a loan, construction loan from a bank, and then try to use our products at the end of construction when the road is when the project is operational. That way, construction risk is off table. To potentially you can get an upgrade. It can be also used during operation. One of the features that our loans have is you can refinance existing loan to create additional funding capacity to pay for any future expansion. So if there's a project that has already been built, it has already been financed, let's say with bonds or private debt, and they're planning to refinance that portion through one of our loans to save and create additional capacity to pay for an extension of the project, that's also an option that some people pursue. And these are all the type of conversations that we have at that initial stage. And we also tell folks that the other benefit that the loan provides is the fact that there's no prepayment penalty. So many folks start the process with us, get a loan from us, and then if the rates go down, if construction is over or operation phase is past to ramp up, and now they can finance in market at a much better rate, they can do it without any penalty. Usually with bonds, you don't have all of those flexibility. So those are the type of conversations that we go through as we provide the initial consultation to folks. So if you have a good project, you think it could benefit from one of our programs, you can reach us. I believe on our website, there's a place that you can submit a request. Somebody from my team is going to schedule a meeting and sit down and talk to you. I think we're out of time. Thank you very much.